Texas. The case went before the Supreme Court, and the decision was handed down just a few minutes ago. The decision of the Supreme Court, sadly, shows the terrible human cost of the Senate Republican strategy to recklessly refuse to fill the vacancy on the Supreme Court created by the death of Justice Scalia. You know what happened several months ago when Justice Scalia was on a hunting trip and sadly passed away, and to the shock of everyone. And there was a vacancy on the Supreme Court. The President of the United States did what he was supposed to do. You see, in Article 2 of the Constitution, there is a requirement that the President fill the vacancies on the Supreme Court. Why would the Founding Fathers put a requirement on the President? They understood that some president could play games with vacancies on the court. Said, no, you have to send your nominee's name to the United States Senate, where we will have the opportunity to advise and consent as to that nominee. The President met his responsibility. Judge Merrick Garland works for the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. In fact, he's the Chief Justice of the D.C. Circuit. The President sent his name to fill the Scalia vacancy. Is Merrick Garland qualified? The American Bar Association just this week said what we already knew. Merrick Garland is unanimously well qualified for the position. So the President's nominee at that point would come before the Senate. In the history of the United States, we have never, ever denied a nominee for the Supreme Court vacancy a hearing and a vote in the United States Senate. Never, until this very moment, when the Republican leadership in the United States Senate said no. We are not going to fill the vacancy because we are hoping that our presidential candidate, in this case, Mr. Donald Trump, will be able to fill that vacancy. So we'll keep the vacancy open for our dream candidate, President Donald Trump. It's the first time in the history of the United States the Senate has turned its back on a presidential request to fill a vacancy on the Supreme Court. And we warned the Republicans this could create some problems. Today, we see exactly the kind of problem that can be created. The human cost of the Senate Republicans' reckless refusal to fill this vacancy on the Supreme Court is going to be felt by literally millions of people. Today, the Supreme Court failed to resolve the legal challenge to DAPA and expanded DACA, the executive orders of the President. The result of that tie vote, 4-4 tie vote, the result of that tie vote leaves millions of families across America in legal limbo. I urge this Justice Department to consider all the legal options to swiftly overturn the injunction that is blocking President Obama from using his legal authority to set immigration enforcement priorities. DAPA and expanded DACA will make our country safer and allow law-abiding individuals with deep roots in our communities to step out of the shadows and contribute more fully to the country they love. Tie vote on the United States Supreme Court. I can't remember the last time that happened. It happens very rarely. It didn't have to happen. If the Senate Republican majority had done its job, had faced its constitutional responsibility, held a hearing for Merrick Garland, court, we could have avoided what we now face, a split court, 4-4, which cannot resolve critical and controversial issues. The net result of the Republican refusal to fill that vacancy is to create an injustice across America for millions living in this country, an uncertainty about their future. That is the height of constitutional irresponsibility, and it played out across the street and was announced just minutes ago. This is what happens when the Senate Republicans refuse to do their job, when they say we're going to play politics with filling a vacancy on the Supreme Court. We're going to hope and pray that Donald Trump will come forward and fill this vacancy with somebody we like a little better than the nominee of President Obama. It is a sad day, and now we know what this constitutional irresponsibility by the Senate Republicans has done. It has created a fractured court. It has split our nation in terms of the law. It has really derogated one of the most important institutions in our government. I just hope that a few Republicans will step up and realize that waiting for President Trump to fill this vacancy is the wrong answer. We need to accept the Constitution's mandate to move quickly to fill this vacancy as quickly as possible. And in the meantime, with the split court decision, we need to call on our Justice Department to do everything possible to try to find a path toward a just resolution, which the Supreme Court was unable to find today. Mr. President, I yield the floor.